Welcome to the unit preview for Unit 1, AP Language and Composition, all about the voice. In preparation for planning this unit, I consulted the scope and sequence to ensure that I was hitting all of the skills that would be necessary to be successful for CA1. I also consulted the course guide to ensure that I was using best practices. In preparation for this unit, I also began to ask myself, what would I be doing to make sure that they were reading various and diverse text closely, being able to respond to the reading, engaging with outside sources, using rhetoric effectively, becoming reflective learners, and conducting research. Just a bit about me. My name is Ted Diddy. My pertinent information is listed on this slide. Feel free to contact me with any questions that you have about this particular unit or to help you plan your own unit. I am uncertain if that's my room number. They did a room shuffle this year and I think that might be right, but I don't think that one matters, as I don't believe that you need my room number to be able to send me an email or a text message to my mobile phone. The statement of inquiry for this unit: to be heard in a community, you need only to speak. To be listened to, you must have a voice. There's a slight change to the statement of inquiry for this unit from last year's unit. I made this change in preparation for the continued transfer from AP to DP. Listed below are the questions that will be factual, that will help us to better put this statement of inquiry to the test. We're looking at how do we define nonfiction. We look at what lenses change perceptions of a work. What is rhetoric? How can a rhetorical triangle be used in both analysis and in writing? What affects the speaker's ability to persuade? What tools do we need to read, understand, and respond to a text or a work at the college level? You'll notice in these questions that I never ask what's a voice, or what a community is, or what it means to be heard or to be listened to. Those are questions that should grow organically through the constant use of the statement of inquiry and ensuring that your lessons hit the factual, conceptual, and debatable questions. If your scholars turn to you one day and say, I know, it matches up with the statement of inquiry, then you're doing your job right. If your scholars turn to you one day and say, wait, that fits with the statement of inquiry because of this, or this, then you're doing your job extremely well. Continuing on with the questions that we'll be focusing on in this unit, we move on to the conceptual questions. What does true, deep understanding of a piece of literature look like? Oftentimes, scholars are capable of understanding the subtle nuance differences in the emojis that were sent to them on a text message. That is a true, deep understanding of that type of literature. But they find it difficult to transfer that skill from what they do on a regular basis in their own lives to other works. How does that concept fit? And if it does, do you just speak to your community, or do you have a voice to be listened to? What are some of the different formats literature can take? Previously, I mentioned a text message from a friend. Yes. As much as I like to roll my eyes at modern use of social media, this is a form of literature. It by no means is the only form, nor the highest form, but it's a way to scaffold in skills that the scholars use on a regular basis, concepts that they're familiar with, to bring them to a deeper understanding of different formats of literature. What tools do you already use to understand and respond to literature? Again, I refer back to the concept that this is something that scholars do regularly. They don't have the vocabulary to discuss it at an academic level. If they did, they wouldn't need to take your class. These are concepts that we need to work in, scaffolding from the simple to the complex as you move from lesson and lesson, objective to objective. The third framework of questions is the debatable questions. Whereas the previous two have answers or concepts that need to be understood, the debatable questions have no right answer. There are simply different perspectives on what a fact would be. What responsibility does the speaker have over the actions of the audience? When we look at different speeches that are given by ex-presidents or community leaders, and we look at what happens afterwards, who's responsible for those actions? The one that listened, or the one that had a voice strong enough to be listened to? I'm not certain. I hope to be able to bring more certainty with myself and my scholars through the studies of the different works that we use throughout this unit. What is the relationship between a member of and a community as a whole? Well, I'm not entirely certain of that one either. I know that there is a relationship, but how that relationship is defined, where the relationships begin and end. Is it the community's necessity to dedicate itself to the members, or is it the members that need to dedicate themselves to the community? If you simply need to speak to be heard, then what does that mean when you need to be listened to? These again are debatable questions that should be brought up on a regular basis in different works and with different formats so that we can always loop back to our statement of inquiry. Prior to going through and looking at the objectives and what individual lessons and skills would need to be a major portion of this, it helps to know where it is we're going. CAs this year for the 11th grade are going to go through a bit of a changeover. At the end of last year, we took some time during our collaboration days to talk about what we would need to best help our scholars to be successful on the AP Lang exam. And one of the ways that we're going to try to better understand what they will need is through the hypothesis that the scholars that are getting 60% or higher correct on two passages in the actual 60-minute time for the reading MC, and then maintaining that percentage while adding more passages in CA2 upwards to a full AP MC, which would be 55 questions for CA3. It should be a maintaining of the percentage as opposed to an increasing of the percentage, because we are leaving the same amount of time, but we're giving them more questions to answer. This should help us in our planning after CA1 and CA2. When we need to look also at the ACT exam, we'll be doing a single passage in 15 minutes. This time limit mimics the time limit they'll have on their ACT. The ACT passages that have been chosen for CA1, CA2, and CA3 all have a variety of questions that they would see over the course of the entire exam. And this should also give us usable data to be able to formulate what lessons need to be retaught and what skills need to be scaffolded to a higher level so they can also find success on the ACT. The constructed response for this year in CA1, CA2, and CA3 will be decided upon during Collaboration Day 1. Over the summer, many teachers make changes to the units that they plan to teach. We have new teachers that are coming in. We will be able to carve out some time during our initial Collaboration Day so that we can decide what essays that we choose to use for CA1. This will be a rhetorical analysis essay, but the one that we pick should be one that we've decided on as a group, and we can then spend a longer period of time, hopefully during our office hours, going over exactly what we can expect from the scholars based on the data that we have from them in class. The other major portion of this unit will be an iSearch. An iSearch is similar to a research paper, but instead of simply doing the research looking at what other people have to say, an iSearch means that the scholars will be creating their own methodology to test a question. The question that we're putting to them for this one is whether or not Friedrich Nietzsche's quote, "All language is a metaphor useful to us, but ultimately detached from reality," is true or not. Our statement of inquiry would claim that this statement is balderdash by saying that you have to have voice to be listened to. Nietzsche's statement implies that regardless of if you are listened to or not, or if you have voice or not, language cannot affect reality itself. In order to be able to be successful on this particular iSearch, you're going to want to put into your plans, as I have in this unit, a variety of work times inside your classrooms, as well as setting deadlines for the individual parts. If you start out by telling them they've got a 3,000 word essay that's due in 9 weeks, they will choke on that. But if you work with them for 200 to 300 words, then again for 600 to 800 words, then again for the actual rhetoric they're going to produce, and finally a 200 to 300 word reflection, these smaller chunks will allow them to get through the process of writing a 6 to 10 page paper. Before they know it, they'll look back on the work that they have done, and it will turn out just fine. Part 1 is the story behind your search. This is where the scholars will be doing some reflections on their own lives and seeing what it's in their lives that they think that they've got enough voice to be listened to. They will be creating their purpose in this particular portion. They will also be discussing why that purpose is important to them. In part 2, they will take what they've learned in class. During the course of this unit, they will be writing rhetorical analysis on a variety of modes of rhetoric, styles of rhetoric, the way that the author uses all of the different rhetorical devices. They can use that as part of this portion of their iSearch. Here they're going to be discussing 3 to 5 rhetorical strategies that they plan on utilizing. They will show how another writer has done so successfully, and they will discuss how they will integrate those particular devices and styles into their own rhetoric. Part 3 is where they actually do the thing they're planning on doing. Sometimes the scholars will be a little bit shocked that you told them you wanted them to figure out how to change their world and then how they were going to go about changing their world, and then you ask them to actually change their world. Be ready for this. It happens. That particular shock wears off pretty quickly. One of the more interesting pieces that I have had scholars complete in the past, there was a young man that put up a series of posters for pet adoptions. And he changed the style of the poster depending upon where in the school he placed it. If he placed it near the art room, the poster was incredibly artistic and went more towards appeals to emotions. Whereas the ones that he placed next to the math and science rooms had more of a clinical nature to them. They listed out different aspects of the animals themselves, perspective, lifespans, size and weight, estimated cost of caring for the animal over the course of a month, year, and its lifespan. The premise behind this was when a scholar entered into or left one of these styles of classes, their brain would be working in a particular manner, and thus the rhetoric would be more useful. Regardless of how they go about doing it, whether they make a public service announcement video, a large art installation, whether they write a song or give a speech, they actually have to do it. And so if they say that what they want to do is change the dress code, then they're going to need to set an appointment with the director of the school in which they can sit down and give them their speech. For part 4 is the reflection. Did it work? How well do you think that your rhetoric gave you voice? Were you actually able to change reality, or is language, as Nietzsche says, ultimately detached from it? The reflection piece being only 200 to 300 words was a source of great concern for several of my scholars last year. They asked whether or not they could write more than 300 words, to which of course I said yes. There's an AP rubric that I'm using to score this particular iSearch. I know. We're moving over to DP. However, at the end of this year, this group of kids is going to take the AP Lang test. My course is listed with College Board as an AP Language and Composition course, although my unit plan styles, statement of inquiries, factual, conceptual, debatable questions, all fall within IB's realm. At the end of this year, these kids are going to be held responsible to an AP rubric. So throughout the year, they need to understand what that means and how well they can perform when given those expectations. Connections to the other classes with this one are fairly straightforward on this particular unit. Language acquisition, the grammar and root word structure are parallel to the foreign language. I strongly recommend that you get with your Spanish teachers, whether they teach AP Spanish or whether they are moving over into Language B. This is an opportunity where you can go back and forth with mentor texts that you're using in your class, both The same text can be used in Spanish in the Spanish room, in English in the English room. You can have scholars that have made translations from a Spanish work, bring that English into the AP class and use that as part of their class discussion, looking at the rhetoric. You can have great small group discussions on the differences between the way that the rhetoric worked in Spanish as to the way the word structure and the grammatical structure works in English. When we look at our individuals and societies class, how you structure this essay and analyze a text is directly applicable to both APUSH and History of Americas when we switch over fully to the DP coursework. Looking at a text and seeing if it is a primary or secondary source, trying to find bias, these are things that connect both of these two subject matters. When we're talking about the iSearch, as well as simply dissecting the text itself to create a hypothesis, in English we call that a thesis. In science, the beginning statement that they're looking to prove in the scientific method is a hypothesis. This directly correlates to the scientific method. They will be using a scientific methodology when they go through and do their iSearch. We will be using a scientific method of making a claim, experimenting with what we can do, having variables of independent nature, a variable and independence. That'll give us the opportunity to directly relate with our science classes. Again, this is a great way to go over with your science teacher and ask, what labs are they doing? That way you can bring in possibly a speech or a TED Talk based on the information that they're using in science, so that you can use the same skills for both. Looking at the arts, we have a discussion and analysis about how art helps us interpret our world and ourselves. When we're talking about having a voice to be listened to, artists have always had a very strong voice. It's possible that we can utilize the visual rhetoric in the same way that we utilize written rhetoric, and we analyze them in a similar fashion. Again, I'd like to give a shout out to the course guide here. From the course guide, directly taken from it in several of the lessons that I planned for this, as well as the objectives, the rhetorical triangle, close reading, interactive instruction, exemplar text analysis, peer feedback, write, discuss, read, write, and immersion text. These are all detailed further in the course guide. The rhetorical triangle and the close reading are AMLs that I took directly from this particular unit. They can be found on Blackboard underneath, shockingly, the AML tag. For your daily lessons, the objectives that I have are pretty well plug and play. The speeches that I'm using, the essays that I'm using, the songs that I use, the arts that I use, they can all be interchanged and the same objectives still be created. A couple of things that I want to mention when it comes to making choices for what you're going to have the scholars read. Just because you love it doesn't mean they will. Just because you think it's important doesn't mean that they will. A lot of it goes along with use some of the standards that are in either the language and composition textbook, for which there's a PDF that you can ask me for if I haven't already given it to you during the collaboration day, as well as the 11th grade standard English textbook that we have access to in hard copy and online. And listen to their conversations. What is it that they're bringing up? What is it that they're adding to it from their own world? What current music, what artwork are they looking at? What other things have they read? What types of essays are they talking about that they've read in their other courseworks, whether it is in another English class or in a science or history? From those conversations is when you can start to pull and change things that you've got for the future that can allow you to be able to enter into a world that the scholars understand. Here is where the IB visual analysis of education comes into play. At the center of IB is the scholar, and they cannot be the center of their education if they don't understand their own world. Another thing I'd like to look at or talk about daily lessons. Work time in class. The scholars have to have time in class to write. But this does not mean the teachers then have an opportunity to sit at their desk and finish paperwork. During work time in class is the perfect opportunity to live grade or to set up mentor desks. When I have deadlines for the 4 parts of the iSearch, for part 1, you'll have kids that are gung-ho that will have been finished with it 2 and 3, possibly even a week, 2 and 3 days, possibly even a week early. Those scholars are the best ones to sit at a desk right next to you at the front of the room and have writer workshops. The ability of other scholars to come up and ask questions and to get feedback on their own writing. A top tip that works very well for work time in class: have the scholars write down what it is that you would like them, or they would like you, to look over for their paper. Maybe the kid's worried about the blending of their evidence. It's entirely possible that a scholar is looking at their assertions, their topic sentences for their body paragraphs, and they've got an issue whether or not it's connected directly to their claim or thesis. That's something that they would write on a post-it note, put on the corner of their desk, so when you're walking around and giving feedback to kids, you know exactly what it is that they're looking for. Oh yeah, did I mention the course guide? Inside that course guide is a variety of well-proven, documented, researched, data-driven strategies that you can use in your classrooms. I've used pretty much every single one of them at least 10 times. You're welcome to contact me if you have any questions about them. Talk to your fellow English 3 teachers when we get together for Collaboration Day and go over a couple of them. Strongly recommend that you pick one that you've never done before and place it into one of your lesson plans somewhere, because getting better at something new just increases your own toolbox, and those can be found in the course guide, which is found on Blackboard.